Good day. This is Dr. Conrad Miller reporting to you with your Fukushima update of April 20th, 2011. We'll talk about earthquakes today, the latest state of the reactors at Fukushima in Japan, and a phrase, cold shutdown. What does that mean? That's what they want to do to the plants. It's going to take about 9 months. We're going to talk about 3 Japanese words that will be interesting to you. Kizuna, Tokai, and Yurekuru. I'll explain that later. But let's start off with what's going on in India, because in the last video installment, we were talking about the plant there at Madban, and the locals don't really want it. They've offered them $33,000 for 2.5 acres, and only 153 of the 2,000 people that were offered the money have taken it, because they don't want the plant, because the fishermen will go out of business, 20,000 fishermen, and it's on an area where they've had earthquakes between 1985 and 2005. They had about 95 earthquakes. So when the environmental minister decided that he would rethink this whole project that's been going on for about 3 or 4 years, they started to clear the land and haven't actually put up the reactors yet because of the Fukushima incident. The locals were a little bit happy, but on Friday he decided he was going to de-think the rethink. So the locals got mad. They wanted to go demonstrate at the area of the plant. Instead, they went into one of the police stations, attacked the police station, and 1 person was killed. And the government had tried to induce the locals to take that money, and they weren't too happy about that. So that's going on in India, which is the only nation so far that has decided to ban the imports from Japan, a blanket ban for about 3 months. And also the FDA, our FDA, the EPA, sorry. The EPA has decided that we will not check out the fish. We're not going to monitor the fish in the Pacific and on our west coast for radiation. And that's not a real great idea when you think about it, because all that radiation that's being poured into the ocean from Fukushima every day is getting into the fish. We know the levels of the iodine went back up again last week, and it's going to take about 9 months to get the plant under control. So as the radiation accumulates in the phytoplankton and in the fish, and then the big fish eat the little fish, and the bigger fish eat the littler fish, and then the humans get the fish, it's not going to be so good when there's radiation in there over time, which will happen. So now the reactors are still melting down 1 through 3. The fuel pool for reactor 4 is still not well covered, so there's a little action going on in there. They found radioactive iodine in there, which shouldn't be there if nothing was going on, and the fuel pools have more radioactivity actually than the cores, because it becomes hot and they take the material out of the cores, the fuel rods, and then they move them into the fuel pools, and then they're supposed to be underwater, and that's not been happening. So they've been having to pour all this water into the cores, and over the cores, rather, into and over the fuel pools, and they're not succeeding well with the one for reactor 4. So they did pump out many tons, about 10,000 tons of water into the ocean so far, and now they have the highly reactive water that's about 10 million times the reactivity of what they pumped into the ocean, and they're pumping that into a storage building. They were going to have a floating island in the ocean. They thought about that too, but that hasn't happened. So let me just check out a couple things for you here. The engineers at the 3 Mile Island plant, it took them 14 years to get that under control, from 1979 to 1993. And what they're doing at Fukushima is they're pouring water in. It's going up as steam, it's coming out as water, and that's getting all around the plant, and it's creating hot spots. Besides the water being so hot, some of the water is 500 rems per hour that it's putting out. Actually, at 3 Mile Island, there were times where it was putting out 1,000 rems per hour, and 500 rems is enough to be a fatal dose. So what they did at 3 Mile Island is they did three things. They decontaminated the walls and the floors. That'll hold down the radiation dose theoretically. But they have to be careful because they can expose the people because the radiation levels are so high. So some people can only work for a minute. And that's what happened at 3 Mile Island. Then they had to rebuild the secondary containments. That's what they think they should do, rather, here. Sorry. And then they should take the cranes out of the buildings and replace them. And then they can defuel the reactor. That step at 3 Mile Island took 5 years. And but they didn't have to rebuild any of the buildings. And the third thing was to peek into the vessel and see how much of the core is melted and flowed beneath the support base. At 3 Mile Island, it melted and it flowed beneath a 5-plate thick steel plate. And they had to cut it with remote controlled tools. And they kept it underwater about 40 feet so that the radiation wouldn't come out and possibly affect anybody. So eventually they had about 150 tons of radioactive rubble that they shipped to Idaho at 3 Mile Island. Now, what they want to do, at Fukushima is they want to do this cold shutdown. Sounds great, doesn't it? Cold shutdown. They're going to get cold. You know what cold is? Cold is under the boiling point of 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cold. That's going to take about 9 months. And then they say it'll take probably 3 decades, 30 years to really get the plant sort of under control. Some people are saying that they're going to make it a green zone in 30 years, which is incredibly crazy because, for example, Chernobyl is still not green. Still, these radionuclides that are all over the ground, like plutonium, 24,000-year half-life, cesium, 300 to 600-year hazardous life, which is the most common of all and most voluminous of all the radionuclides that are being spilled out of Fukushima today. And remember, Fukushima's already spilled out about 50% of the load of Chernobyl in cesium, and 20% of their iodine releases are in relation to the 100% that were spewed out of Chernobyl in 1986. Okay, so that's what's going on there. So we'll see what happens. The locals think they can come back, but they're probably never going to be able to come back within that 25-mile radius, at least, around Fukushima. Some old people are still living there. A lot of cancers take a long time to develop. Thyroid is a little quicker, but lung takes 20 or 30 years. So they don't really want to leave. And then there's some people that live outside the exclusion zone at Chernobyl too that are staying, that are older. Okay, now the 3 Japanese words. Kizuna is a bond of friendship, and the Japanese people are very thankful for all the help they've gotten, and the kizuna as a bond of friendship that they've been shared with the people of the world who are helping Japan. The other word is Tokai. Tokai is the big one. That is the place where there's been all these earthquakes in the past, about every 150 years. They're expecting the next one, and they're expecting an 8.4 gigantic earthquake. But actually, this one was 9.0 at Fukushima. So, and of course, they built their first nuclear reactor right there at Tokai in that area. Isn't that wonderful? I just want to tell you this word Yurekuru this is what happens lately. Okay, so they have this detection system that transmits warnings of earthquakes in Japan a few seconds in advance, and to the television broadcasters and to cell phones. In recent weeks, it has not been unusual to see nearly all the people in a restaurant or train suddenly look at their cell phones at the same time. Yurekuru, a free app for the iPhone that delivers such warnings. Its name might be translated as "The Shaking is Coming." Yurekuru now has 1.5 million users, compared with 100,000 before March 11th when the tsunami and the earthquake occurred. So, Yurekuru. And if you look back in your history books, in Japan's history, about 1,000 years ago, actually in 869, not 1869, 869, there was a tsunami that flooded the plains of northeast Japan. And the sea soon rushed into the villages and towns, overwhelming a few hundred miles of land along the coast. There was scarcely any time for escape, though there were boats and the high ground just before them. In this way, about 1,000 people were killed in 869 in Japan. These were the same plains that were submerged this month, well, in March rather, of 2011, by the Fukushima tsunami. Analysis for sediments left by the 869 tsunami led to an estimate that the earthquake then had a magnitude of 8.3. So that's going on. And what else do I want to tell you? Oh, announcement on April 23rd, the interview with Jeanette Grossman, the doctor, toxicologist, internist, who edited the Chernobyl catastrophe book and the consequences, is being interviewed, or was interviewed actually on March 5th, 6 days before the accident, by Carl Grossman, and that's going to be on DirecTV, channel 348, at 9 o'clock at night, Eastern Time, and it's also going to be on Dish TV on the same day at 9 o'clock, and that is going to be channel 9415. So 9415 on Dish and 348 on DirecTV, and you can also pick it up on freespeech.org. And that's at 9 o'clock at night, and actually also 6 o'clock in the morning. 9 o'clock in the morning on the 23rd, Chernobyl Day, 25th anniversary, is April 26th. The incident occurred in 1986, a steam explosion and a graphite fire that lasted for 10 days, spewed about 7 billion curies of radiation, about 80% of the core of the reactor, into the atmosphere, and the ramifications are still being felt today, because you can't eat wild boar, for example. In Germany, about a third of them is still contaminated about 300 miles away by the cesium from Chernobyl. And we'll talk about Chernobyl in one of the next 2 videos, the story of Chernobyl. This is Dr. Conrad Miller, signing off. Have a good day.